Let's get real. Respect in a relationship isn't just about what you say, it's about how you show up. It's the way you carry yourself, the standards you hold, and the energy you bring into the room. If you're constantly wondering why your connection feels off, why your dynamic shifts from admiration to disinterest, it's time to stop pointing outward and start owning what you allow, tolerate, and project. Because here's the truth: respect isn't given, it's earned, protected, and sustained by your choices. Today, we're not sugarcoating. We're breaking down 7 quiet behaviors that kill respect, and you won't even see them coming until the foundation starts to crack. So if you're ready to get radically honest with yourself and elevate the way you show up in love, listen close. There's something deeply quiet and invisible about the moment a woman swallows her desires, not just sexually, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually, just to preserve a connection. It doesn't scream, it doesn't cry, it tiptoes, it nods politely. And over time, it dismantles the very fabric of who she is. You don't lose respect because of one grand betrayal. It leaks out through the slow erosion of your truth. One small compromise after another. One more "it's okay" when it's not. One more smile that masks the ache of not being seen. That's where it begins. You might think you're being accommodating, flexible, or low maintenance. You might believe that expressing too much will push someone away. But what really happens is far more dangerous. You start teaching the connection to live without your needs. You teach the relationship that your desires can be ignored, that your boundaries can be blurred, that your pleasure, your pace, your no's, and your yeses are adjustable, fluid, based on someone else's comfort. And once that teaching takes root, it becomes very hard to undo. In intimacy, this shows up in ways you may not even notice. You lean into what pleases them, but you're quiet about what arouses you. You hold back when you want to be held closer. You let go when you wanted to be gripped. And while your body is there, part of your soul slowly retreats. There is nothing more disorienting than showing up physically in a connection while emotionally fading in the background. And it all stems from one root: fear. If I'm fully honest about what I want, I might lose the connection altogether. But the real loss isn't someone walking away. It's you abandoning yourself to make them stay. The truth is, the most magnetic kind of intimacy is built when both people feel safe to bring all of themselves forward. But that safety starts with you choosing to protect your truth before protecting their reaction. When you prioritize their ease over your honesty, you become an echo instead of a presence. It's not noble, it's not kind, it's self-erasure. And over time, it's not just them who stops respecting you. You stop respecting yourself. That's when resentment creeps in. That's when distance builds. And that's when the connection you tried so hard to preserve begins to wither anyway. Here's a raw truth most won't say out loud. When you stop advocating for what you feel, people stop feeling the need to care, not because they're cruel, but because you trained them that your silence is comfort, that your needs are optional, that your dissatisfaction is quiet and manageable. You didn't lose respect in a blowout fight. You lost it in the quiet agreement to silence yourself. There's a seductive lie many women have been taught to believe, one that whispers, if you give enough, he'll stay. If you love harder, show up more, please deeper, he'll finally choose you the way you want to be chosen. So you overextend, you overgive, you offer your time, your body, your emotional labor like it's proof of worthiness. You anticipate needs that haven't even been spoken. You pour yourself out, hoping the weight of your loyalty will be enough to tip the scale toward devotion. But in the language of intimacy, overgiving doesn't build connection. It builds imbalance. And imbalance slowly breeds quiet resentment, not lasting respect. Intimacy is not earned through self-abandonment. It's not a reward for performing. Yet, so many women carry this ache that if they don't give more, they'll be replaced, overlooked, left behind. So they offer themselves up in pieces, not because they feel overflowing with desire, but because they're afraid that withholding anything, whether it's affection, availability, or their very body, will mean they're no longer needed. But the tragedy is this: when you give from emptiness, when you push past your own exhaustion to meet someone else's expectations, you don't get closeness. You get depletion. And what begins as a desire to connect quickly turns into an unconscious transaction. You give your softness in exchange for attention. You give your loyalty in exchange for safety. You give your sensuality in exchange for being seen. But the truth is, no one truly honors what's offered in desperation. When your inness becomes a means to secure validation, it's no longer sacred, it's strategic. And over time, the very thing you're trying to build, mutual respect, becomes impossible because you've already made it clear that your needs come last. The most powerful shift you can make in your intimate life is to give from wholeness, not fear. To choose when, how, and with whom you share your energy. Not because you're afraid of losing them, but because you know your body is a privilege. When you know that your love, your presence, your erotic openness is not a tool to be used, but a gift to be invited. You move differently. You stop negotiating with your value. You stop giving out of guilt. You stop proving you're enough through service. And that shift, it changes everything. There's a fire that dies out slowly in a woman who gives too much without receiving. She becomes quieter, her touch dulls, her presence fades, not because she's less loving, but because she's tired of proving that her love is worth reciprocating. And the saddest part, she often doesn't realize it's happening until she's already disconnected from herself. What she thought would bind the connection tighter has now unraveled her at the seams. Because when giving becomes a method of control, not an expression of choice, the soul begins to retreat. There is a kind of silence that doesn't soothe. It suffocates. It's the silence that creeps in when a woman chooses to keep the peace rather than speak her truth. In relationships, this looks like smiling when something hurt, nodding when your gut says no, or pretending you're fine when your heart is anything but. And in intimacy, it's even more subtle. It's saying yes with your body when your spirit is unsure. It's tolerating touch that doesn't feel connected. It's avoiding eye contact after because saying what's real feels too risky. This is how intimacy becomes hollow, when performance replaces presence and peacekeeping replaces truth. At first, the avoidance feels protective. You tell yourself it's not the right time, or that what you feel isn't a big deal. You convince yourself that expressing discomfort might make things awkward, or worse, drive them away. So you hold it in, you play cool, you become agreeable. But what starts as small concessions begin to calcify into a pattern. You learn how to contort, how to mold yourself into whatever version feels easiest to love. You prioritize comfort over clarity, ease over emotional honesty, and that's where the disconnect begins. In intimate moments, this shows up as quiet compliance. You go along with what's happening. Even if it doesn't light you up, you make yourself smaller, less vocal, less specific about what you need. You become the accommodating lover, the easy one, the one who doesn't rock the boat. But deep down, a part of you is aching for something more. Deeper touch, slower pace, mutual vulnerability. Yet you say nothing, not because you don't want it, but because somewhere along the way, you learned that being wanted was safer than being honest. But here's the hidden cost. Every time you silence yourself, you disconnect from your power. You create intimacy with someone else while abandoning intimacy with yourself. You lose the rhythm of your own desire. You start to forget what actually brings you pleasure, what excites your body, what makes you feel safe. Your silence doesn't preserve peace. It preserves a version of you that can't fully breathe. And the danger of this is that respect quietly starts to fade, not because of loud fights or broken promises, but because your presence no longer commands engagement. When your needs are never voiced, they're never remembered. When your boundaries are never asserted, they're never respected. And when your pleasure is always secondary, it eventually becomes invisible. You begin to blend into the background of the relationship, always there, always agreeable, always nice, but rarely real, rarely fully met, rarely fully known. You don't need to be loud to be heard. You need to be honest, not just in moments of conflict, but in moments of closeness, because nothing dissolves connection faster than pretending everything is okay when your heart is quietly shutting down. And nothing is more erotic, more powerful, more deeply magnetic than a woman who can say, with steady conviction, this is what I need to feel safe. This is what I desire. This is what I won't ignore. There's a dangerous kind of devotion that masquerades as strength, a quiet, stubborn loyalty that keeps a woman rooted in situations where her soul is shrinking. She tells herself she's being patient, that real love takes work, that if she just waits a little longer, proves herself a little more, things will change. But beneath the surface, what she's really doing is ignoring what her intuition has been screaming all along. She's staring red flags in the face and painting them white with hope. She's mistaking emotional endurance for connection. And that kind of loyalty, it doesn't deepen love, it drains it. In the world of intimacy, this shows up in incredibly subtle ways. It looks like tolerating touch that feels disconnected, pretending to enjoy moments that feel empty, or accepting a lack of tenderness and calling it normal. It's choosing to stay available to someone who hasn't shown emotional safety, simply because you believe walking away would mean giving up too soon. But staying when your body is tight with tension, when your boundaries are disrespected, when your truth is constantly silenced, it's not love, it's survival. And the longer you stay, the more you start to believe that this is all you're worthy of. There's a false nobility in self-sacrifice that's been glamorized for far too long. Ride or die. Be the bigger person, don't give up on someone you love. But none of these mantras apply when your needs are consistently unmet, when your sensuality is being ignored, when your emotional safety is violated by silence, inconsistency, or subtle dismissal. And yet so many women continue to stay hoping that their unwavering presence will eventually melt the walls, shift the energy, or awaken deeper love. But love built on your suppression is not love, it's dependency dressed in devotion. This kind of quiet suffering doesn't just affect your mind, it seeps into your body. Your sensual energy becomes muted. You feel less radiant, less expressive, less alive in your own skin. You start second-guessing your instincts, questioning your expectations, wondering if wanting more is asking too much. But what you're really experiencing is not too much. It's your inner wisdom resisting abandonment. It's your sensual self refusing to disappear. That voice that aches inside you, that yearning for softness, presence, reciprocity. It's not weakness, it's truth. And truth doesn't stop speaking, even when you try to silence it with loyalty. Intimacy without integrity is erosion. It doesn't crack overnight. It slowly chips away at your self-respect, your boundaries, your ability to recognize yourself in the mirror. You find yourself exhausted from constantly managing the emotional temperature of the relationship, adjusting your energy to avoid conflict, tolerating coldness, and convincing yourself it's just a phase. But the longer you ignore the disconnect, the more you abandon the parts of yourself that once knew how to speak, how to feel, how to say, "I deserve more than this." There's nothing empowering about staying in something that doesn't nourish your mind, body, or heart. And there is nothing admirable about calling your own starvation strength. There is a haunting loneliness that lives inside physical closeness when emotional presence is missing. You can be touched, kissed, held, even made love to, yet feel completely unseen. The world tells women that availability is a form of affection. That saying yes, being easygoing, staying receptive is part of being feminine, part of being loved. But when you stay physically open to someone who does not make space for your inner world, your softness becomes survival, not connection. And what was meant to be sacred turns into self-betrayal, disguised as love. You might keep showing up, you might keep making time, offering affection, initiating intimacy. But deep down, a part of you knows it's not being met. You feel the gaps, the emptiness between the words. You feel how quickly the passion fades once it's over. You sense that your body is welcome, but your thoughts are not. That your presence is appreciated, but your pain is inconvenient. And still, you continue to give, because there's a voice inside you that whispers, maybe if I give more, feel less, talk less, need less, he'll finally see me. But that voice doesn't come from love. It comes from fear. In relationships, especially in intimacy, we are taught to give more than we are taught to protect. We are taught to open our bodies before we learn how to defend our hearts. So what happens is this: you allow access, even when you feel emotionally neglected. You crave closeness, so you compromise. You seek validation through touch, hoping the tenderness will translate into connection. But what you end up doing is creating a dynamic where your emotional silence becomes a requirement. And over time, you begin to feel like a guest in your own relationship. Being physically available while emotionally invisible doesn't make you strong. It makes you disappear. It makes you question whether your feelings are even valid. It makes you doubt your ability to receive real intimacy. And eventually you start to believe that what you have is all you're going to get. That being held is the same as being chosen. That attention is the same as care. That sex is the same as connection. But your body knows the difference. Your energy knows the difference. You feel it when your heart aches in the middle of closeness. When your spirit feels lonelier after the lights go out. When your body remembers every moment it was touched but not truly cherished. And still, you stay. You stay because you don't want to seem cold. You stay because you're afraid of what your absence might mean. You stay because walking away would force you to admit that what you were calling love was in fact survival. But underneath all of that fear is the truth you've been avoiding. Your emotional presence matters. Your internal world is not too much. Your silence is not peace. Your availability is not proof of love. There's a unique kind of heartbreak that happens when you show up in intimacy physically, but your spirit feels miles away. You go through the motions, the smile, the kiss, the touch, the rhythm. On the outside, everything appears connected, but inside, you're checked out. Something feels off. The moment doesn't move you. The pleasure is muted. The spark feels more like a flicker. And even if the other person doesn't notice it, you do. You feel the emptiness in your chest. You feel your body trying to participate while your heart stands at a distance, quietly observing. And that's when you realize you've separated yourself from your own sensual truth. This kind of disconnection doesn't happen all at once. It builds slowly. It often begins the moment you start pretending. Pretending you're okay when you're not. Pretending the touch feels good when it doesn't. Pretending the emotional climate is safe when it hasn't been for a while. You want to keep things going, to maintain harmony, to avoid the discomfort of difficult truths. So you act the part. But what you don't realize is that every time you override your inner signals, you step further away from the sacred magnetic version of yourself that once felt so alive. You start to doubt your instincts. You rationalize the absence of connection. You convince yourself that this is just what happens in long-term dynamics or that emotional distance is normal. And while yes, relationships evolve, they should never cost you your own erotic aliveness. Your sensuality is more than a performance. It's an energy, a truth, a language. And when that energy begins to fade, it's not always because of boredom or routine. It's often because you've been silencing what's real. The mind tells you to keep going, but the body never lies. The body remembers every moment it was touched, but not desired, every kiss that lacked presence, every time you faked closeness to avoid confrontation. And what happens over time is this: your body becomes numb to pleasure because your spirit doesn't feel safe. You can still show up, you can still make love, you can still look engaged, but something sacred has gone missing. And the longer you ignore that absence, the more your energy retreats, the more your fire dims, the more your sensuality shifts from embodied to mechanical. You stop radiating, you stop drawing in, because you can't magnetize from a place of emotional vacancy. There is nothing more intimate, more erotic, more powerful than a woman fully connected to herself. A woman who knows what she wants, what she likes, what she'll no longer fake. A woman who honors the whispers of her body, who pauses when her soul feels uninvited. And most of all, a woman who understands that real intimacy doesn't begin with someone else. It begins with her own alignment, because when you abandon yourself in intimacy, you teach your heart that its truth is too inconvenient to live in the room.